Sara Hartley is an author and advocate for children's social emotional learning. She writes empowering stories that help kids to embrace their big feelings and understanding of themselves and discover their purpose. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me, George. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you on. Tell us about your personal lives, more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Well, I live in Denver, Colorado with my husband and two boys and our yellow lab bear. My professional background actually started in landscape architecture, but after the recession in '09, shifted gears and went into healthcare marketing and technology. So I've been at the role where I am today for the last 14 years as the vice president of health systems for health grades. But quite honestly, my deeper purpose really emerged through parenting and navigating neurodiversity in our home. We had a bit of a low point several years back where I had actually just gotten diagnosed with Lyme disease. My oldest had gone through some testing and had been diagnosed with ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and was highly gifted. So he had a well above average high IQ. And so while we were going through all of that, my little one also was born with an absent cranial nerve 7 and later to find out really no rhyme or reason. He has this left side facial palsy where his that nerve controls your eye. If your eye can blink and can cause your smile to be a bit droopy. And so all of that really compounded. And I was in the shower one day and I just had this moment and said, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And that actually sparked the creativity for the first book that I wrote. There are 14 in the Purposefully Me series that I've created for these children's books. And ultimately, the goal with those is to help children understand that there's beauty in being unique, allow them to try to lead with confidence, understand more of their emotions, and lead with kindness as well. And so that kind of took me along this journey for quite some time of developing and creating these books as I'm working on launching the first one. And so along that journey, when I created my company, I really wanted to understand, what is the philosophy that I'm trying to instill here? And I started thinking a lot about how while I was diagnosed with ADHD at 25, at that time I really wasn't given any sort of strategies of what to do. They just kind of give you medication and they say, be on your way. And diving into this with my oldest child, I felt like I was learning more about myself along the way every day. It was like something else was more and more eye-opening to me. And so, what I've developed is echo parenting, which is really the philosophy that I'm on this parallel journey with my child and I'm healing my own triggers and my own trauma from childhood all at the same time. And I had to think to myself, what is going to help me in the moment to really stop yelling and stop being triggered? And so I've developed an aligned parenting method, and that's really how that was born to just help parents really identify with what their kids and understand them a bit more, so that they can communicate with compassion and try to find more in that meaning and who they are and really have that emotional regulation that their child can mirror from them.
What a journey.
It has been.
Well, I don't know that I've ever heard the term echo parenting, but it certainly makes sense in a lot of ways. So I have three children. I have two boys and a little girl, 9, 6, and 2.5. And certainly in a lot of ways, it is sort of building the airplane on the fly. So
Ah, yes, it is. And it's funny that you say that because one of the things that I talk about a lot is similar to being on an airplane. They tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before you help anyone else. And I think that's the same thing with parenting and emotional regulation and understanding that self-care is really important because if you're not regulated, your children aren't going to be. And I'm in the thick of it with you. Mine are 9 and 6, as they both had birthdays last week. So similar ages. So you know exactly all the ins and outs of elementary school and the challenges it can bring as well.
that's so funny. My kids had birthdays last week too, Sarah.
Oh, wow.
We'll talk about that offline. That is pretty wild. So I'll turn my birthday's next week, so I'll turn 47 years old. So I guess I was a little bit older when I had kids, but I always would look at people that were having kids at 15, 18, 25 and think, oh my goodness, I was not anywhere close to being a fully formed adult at that age. So it would have been really hard. But now I look at it now and I'm still not a fully formed adult. So, um, but the idea of doing that just means that you're open and willing to be doing work on yourself. And I wonder if everybody is.
It's also interesting that you say that as part of having all of these books, I've established an author platform and social media presence. And more recently, I did a little test to the internet audience and had a really bold statement on the reel and said, when your child says, I hate you. And I actually was talking about something different. That was more of the hook. And so I wanted to see, were people drawn in by this? Do they actually even listen or read what you put out there? And then there's the herd mentality. If one person writes something negative, how will that continue? And it was really interesting to see the negative comments that went as far as, I would just backhand my child, or it sounds like they need a spanking, or, this soft parenting. I'm overhearing everything about soft parenting when they never listened to the actual reel that I was discussing. They just saw one person's comment and continued to throw in their very negative opinion. And there were, of course, several that were not as negative. But it was just an interesting thing to see. And I wonder, in what place is that those parents are willing to work on themselves, or others that, kind of live on an older philosophy of your child has to respect you and you have to, put force in front of them and make them fear you, which is really the opposite of where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, it's kudos to you for throwing it out there on the internet and seeing what's going to come back, and that doesn't surprise me. So if you don't mind, I don't think everybody understands, and I don't either, um, social emotional learning, or that whole approach. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I think about the work that I'm doing and really trying to take what at least my son's school has a large social emotional learning established there. They do things from the Seven Habits of Highly Effective Kids version of that book. And they actually walk through those steps with their social emotional coordinator at school. And we're in the public school system here in Colorado. And not every school is going to have that type of social emotional learning, but typically when there are counselors that will work with the students just to help them understand some of the big emotions that they're having, especially if your child is neurodiverse. Oftentimes emotional regulation can be a large part of that, especially where twice exceptional comes in, where my children are both highly gifted, so they have a very high IQ, and then they have a learning disability of ADHD on top of that, which makes them twice exceptional. And so their academic ability and IQ is very high, but yet their social emotional skills are very low. And so that can make for some big explosions. And where my work really sits is that intersection of neuroscience, emotional regulation, and storytelling to try to help children understand that they can feel a little less alone in their own brains, that when they read these stories, they might say, oh, I see myself in that child, and feel a little bit less alone of maybe they were having some anger about something specific, or just having some executive functioning skills that were difficult. Maybe it's remembering their homework, or even trying to get dressed in the morning can be difficult for certain children. So really bringing the elements of what's happening to you emotionally, how you're feeling in those moments, and how that might impact other areas of your life at school or at home.
Thank you. It's so funny that people will, and it's not funny at all. It's the most obvious thing in the world that if you think that spanking your kids is the proper way to parent, then that's what you're going to think. And if you think that social emotional learning or whatever modality, if you think Democrats are the best, then you think Republicans are stupid, kind of a thing. So we're so binary and so tribal when it comes to all this stuff. So that's not a surprise. I know how important it is for me to regulate my emotions and how challenging it is as a 47-year-old grown up. And so appreciating that children do not have it's not obvious. And I'm sure that kids feel things way more than probably I do. So to give them the tools to start to identify and manage your feelings, and how you process those, so valuable. And why wouldn't any parent do it? But just telling them to do it is not helpful because they don't know how to do it. And so if we could show and not tell by story, that's a really long way that I kind of got here, is helping parents to identify and help their kids with something they probably struggle with in the form of a book. I think I see a lot of value in that.
Absolutely. And I think while it is set for elementary school ages, the classroom is a classroom of fourth graders. Each book will tell a different perspective of the child. At the same time, especially when I think of my own ADHD brain, I like to consume information in certain doses. It's harder for me to sit down, especially if it's more of a self-help book. I'd rather listen to self-help and read fiction. It's hard to sit there and really work on yourself in that capacity. So biting it off in smaller chunks, or you're reading it with your child, you'll have that ability to learn something about yourself as well. And then in the back, there's discussion questions and a glossary of terms, which sparks some of those conversations with your children. And I think you're exactly right. They weren't born understanding how to manage these emotions. And I think most of us as parents probably felt like we did a pretty great job at managing our emotions until we had children. The hardest part about being a parent of neurodiverse children is being neurodiverse myself and not realizing that there were certain things that would trigger me. I had no idea the challenges that I would have at maintaining that emotional regulation when, your child is melting down and things that, I loved live music, gone to concerts my entire life. Now, all of a sudden in our home, the volume seems to be so much louder, and I really struggle when that volume is loud. It can kind of set me off and push me over the edge when they're just trying to be kids, or maybe they're just getting out energy from the day that they've had at school. But yet, it's very difficult for me to try to manage that on my own. I'm in a different setting now. That's not the loud volume I want. I want the music. I don't want the screaming. And so it's a difficult thing to try to be the one to model that regulation when we've never had the skills or the strategies our entire life. So I'm undoing 42 years. You're undoing 47 years. It's just a total different thing to look at when your child is melting and then you've never had to worry about that historically.
And then you compound that with, especially if it's happening in public, of feeling embarrassed because our egos come into it. And I want people to think of me as this perfect parent who doesn't scream at their kids, and oh, I'm guilty and I feel ashamed. And those are a lot of emotions to regulate and to manage.
Yes, they are. I think you hit the nail on the head with the shame and the guilt. That's really more of how we were raised. And using that element of fear is actually what causes that shame and guilt. And so most of us were raised to fear authority. And now we're trying to break those generational cycles and understand to say it's okay to have these emotions. And here's how we can do that, because the only way our children are going to learn is by watching us. And I've noticed that if I've ever had a difficult moment, of where I then might hear my child say something later and I'm like, "Ooh, they got that one from me. That's not good. I've got to try to fix that, or show them what they really should say in that moment."
Yeah, it's not great when my kids display my handiwork for sure. So I do have to remind myself that they're 9 years old or 7 or 6 or whatever, and I don't need to use my superior intellect to verbally rip them apart. That's probably not a helpful thing, long term or short term. So,
Yes, exactly.
um, vulnerability, um, is that a wise thing? As I'm reading one of your books with my kids, and I say, hey, James, I remember when I was little, and even 2 weeks ago when I got mad and I wrote this got person a mean message or whatever. Did you advocate that we are vulnerable and personalize this?
Absolutely. So whether it's that you're correlating that experience to something that happened when you were a child, that makes you relatable. It makes them think that the feelings that they're having inside are not feelings that are just specific to them, because that can trap them even further into this feeling of being alone. And at the same time, as you're sharing, that's going to create the trust between the two of you so that later in life, when I think about, high school years, if we're starting young, now they feel comfortable and confident to come to us. Maybe we've had a similar situation. I'm sure that I have. My parents laugh about stuff now, but and at that time, I don't want for my children to lie to me because they're afraid of what my reaction's going to be. And if I do make a mistake, the best way to teach them how to be accountable is to say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake." You don't bring in the but you did this. You wait till you're very calm, and maybe it's several days later and you've had that time to reflect. But repairing, that's going to allow for the connection. And the more connection that you have, the better and more stable your relationship's going to be, so that when they are older and they maybe are in high school and they get into a sticky situation, they know number one, they can call you immediately. You're not going to judge them, you're not going to shame them, you're not going to be upset with them for whatever it is. And two, they're going to think about how you would react in that situation, and maybe they will feel confident enough to say no or to walk away or to speak up when they're supposed to. And so the only way they're going to learn that confidence is by having those really vulnerable conversations with them.
That makes a ton of sense. Feeling alone, is that one of the main bad things that kids feel as a result of not being able to process emotion because they feel like they're the only people feeling these feelings?
I think that's definitely top of mind. And part of that too, for a child who is neurodiverse, there's a lot of negative thoughts. I've read things of, by the time your child's 18, they will have been told no or kind of scolded in a way, for those that have ADHD, like 20,000 more times than a neurotypical child. And so there's already these negative thoughts that are coming into their brain. They're already trying to combat what's happening. So you have to constantly reaffirm the positive things. And if they're being told constantly, like, don't touch this, don't do that, you did that wrong, then they're going to continue to have this lack of self-confidence inside and just not feel like they're good. I know from my experience with my son, whenever he's gotten into something at school, I know that his principal tries to still reinstill that they are good kids, but no matter what, if you go to the principal's office, you have that feeling of being a bad kid. And so that's something that kind of goes on repeat in their brains of like, I'm a bad kid. And I really don't think that there are any bad kids out there. I think there are really good kids that they have hard times. They maybe make poor decisions or bad decisions, but they're all good at heart. We just have to show them how to be that way. And that's, a way of doing that is being open, being vulnerable, teaching them these aligned parenting methods that really are more for any person and for the child, to bring that awareness to yourself and to identify what those triggers are and use grounding techniques to become calm in those moments.
I appreciate all of that. I think that this is all it's practical and it sounds like it's approachable. I mean, I dislike immensely when people say just do it, because if I don't know how to do it, then I can't just do it. But having these books, I think that that'll be such a wonderful tool for helping to do something that I'm interested in doing, which is helping them to be self-managers of their own thinking and self emotional regulation. I think that it's nothing but a really positive thing.
Absolutely. And the way that I've created the Align method, it can be done in less than 60 seconds. So it's a simple 5-step framework. But to your point, I feel like people always say, yeah, just do it. But how do you have to start practicing it, number one. But the way that this is different is it takes the first portion of it is more of that metacognition, where you're coming out of being reactive and in the moment to aware of what's happening in your body. You're feeling, what are those sensations? Like, is my chest tight, or am I grasping my fists, is my jaw clenched, or am I sweating? What are some of those physical sensations that are happening when you're at that place where you might lose it? Then you're labeling those emotions, and you're then becoming curious of what's causing this. Most of us don't go from 0 to 100 for no reason. Like, we're all pretty reasonable people, but there's always a trigger, like something that's happened. Maybe it was a bad day at work. For the kids, maybe they had a rough day at school or somebody said something mean. Maybe they haven't eaten and they're a little hangry. I know I get hangry. It could be something as simple as that, or you're just tired. You didn't sleep well last night. So, what is that trigger? But you can identify that all you want. If you're not doing an actual actionable grounding tool after you've made that identified and what those emotions are, that you're not going to really go anywhere from there. So you have to then implement a tool that's going to truly bring that calm to your body. Because I know that I've been in scenarios where if I'm starting to get frustrated, but I can do something like naming three things I see, or I'm taking a sip of water, or, I spy, or, other grounding type of techniques that I like, it can bring me back pretty quickly. If I'm already at that very, I'm at a 9.5, then it's harder to bring it back. And so it might take a little bit more time to sit with it before you can really get back into that emotional regulated state. But the last piece of nurturing is really that connection. So whether you are doing this alone and then you're reminding yourself, I am a good parent, I am a good person, we all make mistakes, or you're telling your child, like, hey, I get it. I know why. I see why you were really frustrated in that moment. Like, let's figure out something together to move forward and take some of those next steps. You have to either give yourself grace or give your child grace.
We need to give everybody a little bit more grace, don't we, Sarah?
Yes, we do.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they connect with you?
You can come to my website or my Instagram. My website is saralewishartley.com. It's SaralewisHartley. You can actually download your free Align Parenting Method Guide there, and on Instagram at Sarah Lewis Hartley.
Excellent. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, share your appreciation. Share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Go to saralewishartley.com and check out all the great resources and everything we've been talking about. You can get your Aligned Parenting Guide there as well. And then you can find Sarah on social media under Sara Lewis Hartley. I will certainly link all of those in the notes of the show. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, George.
Finally, friendly reminder, do your part by doing your best.